It's important, actually, the subtitle, A Portrait of Donald Trump in 3,500 Lawsuits. And as you point in the book, we're not sure, maybe more than that.
Well, the American Bar Association said 4,000. These are the lawsuits he had before he took office. And a little more than half, he was the plaintiff in chief, and the others, he was on the receiving end.
Now, he must have won some.
Oh, yes, he did win some. Most of them he settled. In most of them, the documents either no longer exist or are sealed. I don't go into every other lawsuit, but I go into in the book, but I go into the types of lawsuits that he had, which are quite interesting.
From your book, we learn it goes all the way back. I mean, I think 1972 was the lawsuit that involved him and his father.
That was the race discrimination case.
Him and his father got sued.
Yes.
And he looked around for a lawyer, and he found one.
In a bar.
Yeah.
And his name was Roy Cohn.
Exactly, who figures it largely in this book. Roy Cohn, for people who don't remember, was a very prominent lawyer in New York for a long time.
Yes, and the subject of a documentary film called Where's My Roy Cohn, which is just opened in all the theaters.
But he learned from Roy Cohn three basic principles that you go through in the book, basically.
Yes. Well, the first principle is always counterattack.
Yeah.
In the race discrimination case, where other lawyers had said to Trump, you can settle and take a consent decree and neither admit nor deny that you discriminated, Cohn's advice was, let's beat him. And the first thing he did was he counterclaimed against the government for $100 million. Well, the court threw that out in about 2 weeks. But it kept the government on its heels, always counterattack. The second principle is always undermine and try to smear your adversary. Cohn had done that successfully with Morgenthau. He was acquitted 3 times after being indicted in the Southern District of New York. And the third principle is always work the press. In the race discrimination case, the first thing they did was call a press conference.
Yeah, and as a practical matter, what Roy Cohn said is, no matter how bad it looks, declare victory.
Oh, yes.
Say you're winning, no matter what.
Yes, declare victory and go home, no matter what happens.
Okay, so apply those now to the present day, for example. We have now the situation with the communication. We don't know really what it was. We're not being told yet what it was between the President of the United States and the leader of Ukraine. That apparently, reportedly, maybe had something to do with investigating Vice President Biden's son. Now, clearly, President Trump is talking about it even right now with Boris Johnson. We just saw him at the UN talking about it. What's the president's normal response as plaintiff in chief?
Well, as plaintiff in chief, he's obligated under the law to release the whistleblower's report and the tape of the conversation to the United States Congress.
He's obligated under law, but he hasn't done that. And the time has passed. There's a time on that.
Because the first thing Roy Cohn taught him was that a subpoena doesn't have to be complied with. You just tear it up and see what happens. And maybe litigate the subpoena, and maybe it'll go away. And then you deflect and you deny and you play for time, and that's what Trump is doing.
Does President Trump have a Roy Cohn now? We've heard that even in the White House sometimes he said, where's my Roy Cohn?
Well, he said that to McGahn because he was dissatisfied with Jeff Sessions, who had recused himself as Attorney General because Sessions wasn't firing Mueller. But there is no real, I mean, one Roy Cohn he has is Bill Barr. Bill Barr seems to give a legal explanation that vindicates Trump every time an issue arises. But there's no one quite so underhanded, so ethically incorrect as Roy Cohn. He would always find a way out. He'd find a way to beat the system, and that's what attracted him to Donald Trump.
So as we take all of this, the 3,500 or more lawsuits and things, is there anything wrong about it?
It's wrong because he had a litigious personality. He had 5 times as many suits as all the leading real estate people in America had combined, at least as many as the top 5 combined. This is abnormal. This is unusual. And one of the reasons is he sued people at the top of a hat. Drop of a hat. His Chinese partner said he likes litigation for lunch, and he would, whenever he was sued, he would, a la Roy Cohn, he would counterclaim for $1 billion. Usually the counterclaim was dismissed.
So the bar and the courts have certain rules and regulations to try to deter frivolous litigation. I mean, back when I practiced law, there's a Rule 11 in the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure.
Still exists.
That you get sanctioned if you're being frivolous.
Yes.
Has he been sanctioned, the President of the United States?
Well, he hasn't personally been sanctioned. I suppose he'd take the position the President of the United States can never be sanctioned.
But as a litigator...
Well, the lawyers can be sanctioned if they bring frivolous litigation. That's what's so strange about the current litigation with Cy Vance, where Cy Vance has subpoenaed the Trump Organization and subpoenaed the Trump Organization's outside accountants, and Trump sued for an injunction. Now, on the face of it, and it went to the federal court to do it. On the face of it, there's a statute of Congress which goes back to the dawn of the Republic, 2283, which says that a federal court will not interfere with state court proceedings. It's called the Anti-Injunction Act. So it ought to be dismissed out of hand. These lawyers brought the case, and in my view, they should be sanctioned.
So give some advice to somebody who would be an adversary to President Trump. How do you deal? You've been an advocate for many years. You must have had lawyers on the other side who were just really litigious, really litigious. How do you deal with that? What's the proper response? I mean, do you match them in kind?
Well, normally, you try to fight the case on the merits. The Cohn-Trump idea was to wage an asymmetrical war, where you would try to undermine the adversary, call it a witch hunt, try to say that try to tarnish the adversary in any way you can. And that's what they did in the race discrimination case. They said that the Justice Department lawyers were acting like stormtroopers, which was ridiculous.
So I think it's important to emphasize, you explain in the book, you actually are a Republican.
Yes.
Moderate Republican. So you voted for Republicans. So you're not a Democratic partisan. At the same time, you say some things that are not very flattering about Donald Trump in this book. Have you been sued yet? Are you going to be sued?
Well, I hope so, because it'll spur the sales of the book. I mean, that's what happened with Michael Wolff when he tried to enjoin the publication of the book, but by Macmillan, who happens to be my publisher. But he hasn't given me any notice that he plans to sue me, and I doubt that he will. Every word in the book has been carefully researched and documented.
So after you've been through this remarkable review of litigation for Donald Trump, what do you know about him today that you didn't know when you started out?
I think what I didn't know was the tremendous influence that Roy Cohn had on him. And I was able to corroborate that when I met with Cindy Adams, who was a close friend of both men. And on election night 2016, when the result was known, he turned to Cindy Adams and he said, "Cindy, if Roy were here, he never would have believed it." Now, Cohn had been dead at that point for 30 years.